Scale is one of the most important concepts in defining tourism. It helps us bring our definition of tourism into focus from a number of different perspectives. Today, we'll discuss how the concept of scale across the three different dimensions of tourism influences our understanding of the phenomena of tourism from different perspectives. I'm Professor Alan Rice. Welcome to TMD at OC. Let's talk tourism. How we define and analyze tourism is largely dependent on establishing what scale we're using to define our system. What elements of the system are we bringing into focus at each level of scale across the three key dimensions? I introduced the three key dimensions in our tourism system in another video. If you haven't had a chance to watch my video on defining tourism, I'll put a link to that in the description for you. It might be helpful to check out that video as well. The first dimension that we're going to look at is the spatial scale, or distance. Remember that to be considered a tourist, you need to travel at least 80 kilometers outside of your normal environment. Again, 80 kilometers is arbitrary. You can change this to what makes sense for your purposes and how you want to define the system for your analysis. However, inside of 80 kilometers, we generally define the space as being local, or our normal environment. Once we travel outside that area, we enter the regional scale. Traveling further, we reach the national, transborder, and international scales of distance. Outer space? Sure. We've seen our first space tourists in the last few years, and even William Shatner has made it into space. It'll be interesting to see how tourism planning and policy will evolve at this scale of distance. In our definition of tourism, we said that we had to be less than 1 year on the temporal scale to be considered tourism. However, many organizations also put a lower limit on the time scale. If you're in a destination region for less than 1 day, you're often not considered a tourist. These travelers are called excursionists or day trippers. Again, it depends on how you're using your system to analyze tourism, whether that distinction is important. Whistler, for example, considers day trippers and excursionists to be tourists because a large part of their market are day trippers from the Lower Mainland and Vancouver. So for them, it makes sense. Let's put these two dimensions together and see how they relate to one another. What we have here is a representation that allows us to see our tourism system boundaries more clearly. So here we've put the geographic or spatial scale across the bottom, and the time scale is the vertical scale in this model. We can now define fields of space and time that contain what we call tourism. So here we can see that inside of 24 hours, we have excursionist day tripper field. Again, these numbers are arbitrary, but we can use them to illustrate the concept of fields. Again, these fields help us to visualize the system more clearly. In the center, the tourism field represents the general area of study for tourism. We can use these fields to further define different types of travel within the tourism system. For example, typically, the further we travel, the longer we tend to spend in a particular destination. Short distance, short duration travel can be defined as day trips or getaways, like a day trip to Big White or a weekend getaway to Vancouver if you're from Kelowna. Once we get out to longer travel and further distances, we get into the realm of holidays and extended holidays. However, if we stay too long, we become part of what a destination might consider temporary migration or even migration to the destination region. That's travel of more than 1 year. The last dimension that I want to look at is the governance dimension. This is the realm where policy and planning decisions about tourism are made. Locally, we have municipal governments and local organizations. But when policy and planning concern larger areas, we move to regional governments like the Central Okanagan or the Province of British Columbia. Then comes the national, cross-border, and supranational levels of governance. Again, this case of space tourism is going to be interesting development. Who governs in outer space? The spatial scale plays a significant role in determining the scope of activities for tourism organizations. City DMOs, like Tourism Kelowna, are responsible for individual municipalities or an area as large as the regional district of the Central Okanagan. The Thompson Okanagan Tourism Association represents one of 6 of British Columbia's tourism regions. Provincial organizations like Destination British Columbia work with their city and regional partners at a broader regional scale than city DMOs. National DMOs, like Destination Canada, work on a policy and promotion level for the entire country. Bilateral partnerships connect tourism organizations at various levels of scale across borders. Finally, supranational organizations have the broadest scope of planning and policy. The United Nations World Tourism Organization, for example, works at connecting its global partners across the tourism industry in policy and planning matters. They're an interesting case because while they're a supranational governmental organization, they have very little power because they cannot impose their policies on governments of sovereign countries. So there we have it. A bit of a primer on scale in tourism systems. I hope you find this content valuable. Check back with the channel later for more interesting tourism content. I'm Professor Alan Rice, and this is TMD at OC.